and it's become this incredible, community gathering place, but also a place where programming from outside happens as well. And it really is just the kind of thing that reflects so well and beautifully on people that they understand that this is actually for them. And, which is the kind of thing when you're coming and growing up in a place like the South Bronx, when you're told that nothing good really ever is going to come from there. And that reflected on you, to see something like this is a really profound thing to offer to people. And it's also the place I got married, also back in 2006 with Zena as my flower girl. She's turning 14 next month, and she's old and kind of deaf, but she's still got it. But it wasn't just a cool place to get married. I mean, it really, really was. Highly recommend it. The park and getting married, whenever possible for everyone. What it did do was help us make us think about what else we could do, in our lives. As a community that had been defined in so many ways by all the bad things that we were, how could we use this as an opportunity to do something that we really wanted for ourselves? And so I met this amazing guy named Ed Nickens, who was running this, who was working at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Coordinating Council, which is a regional transportation group in New York State. And he told me about this awesome project through the feds that was literally designed to give feasibility fund money to projects that were reducing congestion and improving air quality. And I remember hearing about these awesome things, like in Copenhagen and Amsterdam, called greenways, these dedicated bike and pedestrian paths. And I thought, that would be really kind of cool if we could build one of these things here, and especially since I knew also that there were major possibilities for things like stormwater management. You could create the kind of possibilities for increased commercial development, on the strips, on the commercial areas in there as well, if you have this beautiful place where things could happen. And lo and behold, I figured out a way to make some really good friends with some awesome people, at the New York State Empire Development Corporation and a whole bunch of other folks, and figured out how to write this proposal. And we ended up getting $1.25 million to design this feasibility study. And it was so interesting because I looked around a lot. I didn't get to Copenhagen and Amsterdam right away, but I remember seeing greenways in these really rich neighborhoods. And I thought, I want one of those in my neighborhood. And looked and identified who were some of the great designers working on some of those, and was able to find a group named Matthews Nielsen, who fortunately did apply, went through the RFP that we did with New York City Economic Development Corporation, and they won the RFP, and we worked with them on this project. And so they worked to design this beautiful, the first phase projects that we are building right now, garnered $50 million worth of investment in the South Bronx. And I'm real excited to say that about $25 million of that came straight from the economic stimulus package, which, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not, that we were the only community-initiated non-vehicular transportation project funded by the stimulus package. Up in the boogie down. Okay? So there you go. And I'm very proud of that. But this is what actual construction looks like. So come up this spring and it's all going to be done, or at least the first phase projects, and then we've got to raise a little bit more money, but that's okay. But it's a real exciting place to be. But the other thing that we knew that we had to do was making sure that, so I was able to bring a lot of, or leverage a whole bunch of dollars, into the South Bronx. But what I did struggle with early on was that I watched these projects come in, but we still had one of the country's highest unemployment rates in the entire state. And and people would be like, yes, Majora, and people in my community would be like, yeah, we love this park stuff and all the great things, that la la la, that's wonderful. But we kind of need jobs here. And so we started, and so we realized that why aren't we making the connection between job creation and environmental remediation? We have to clean up this community. Why wouldn't we want to train people from our own community to do some of this work? So we started this green collar job training and placement system specifically to teach people about how do you do this kind of ecological restoration work. So everything from urban forestry management to green roof installation to learning how to clean up contaminated lands to oh my goodness, there's a whole host of other things that we were able to teach folks how to do. And these were people who actually had some pretty severe barriers to employment, most generationally impoverished. Another good portion of them, had been incarcerated at some point in their life. You know, so these were folks, you know, who had actually, in many cases, had not even witnessed folks with a legitimate job. And so training people, you know, who don't have that as an experience, we have really had to do the whole soft skill training as well. So things like things that would probably be very natural, you know, for you and your families. Things like you know, how do you be a team player? You know, how do you look busy when your boss is around? If you don't know this, you don't know that. But those are little tidbits that, you know, we were able to share with folks. But we were able to boast this kind of success rate, you know, really simply because we were able to instill a bunch of that in our folks as well. And the fact that so many of them went to college as well too was really exciting. But the whole point around this was that, you know, another reason why we had that placement rate was because we were looking around for different types of markets. You know, like we knew, you know, just from the kind of climatic trends that were going on, that there was going to be a need for things like erosion control, definitely brownfield remediation, stream bank stabilization, and absolutely stormwater management. And all that stuff is green infrastructure. So we trained to that. And you know, dealing with things like urban heat island effect was also something that we wanted to work on too. You know, and I was absolutely fascinated, so much so, by the way people were doing green roofs in Germany, and the fact that they were used as this tremendous stormwater management you know, opportunity. They absorbed lots of stormwater, there were lots of green stuff, you know, helped clean the air, dealt with urban heat island effect, and all this kind of good stuff. And you know, I knew eventually at some point there was going to be a market, you know, for it in New York City, and we were preparing, you know, for that type of market in a bunch of different ways. One of the things we did was actually start our own green roof installation company while I was at Sustainable South Bronx, and that's why I'm showing so many pictures of people actually working, you know, on said building. This was the one that we did on top of my roof. I was our first client, actually, which was kind of cool. And this was just we just did the absolute cheapest we could do, which was like planting seedlings and stuff. But, and this is my upstairs neighbor who came to like survey the work that we did. He was so, just like, you know, you forgot a spot. He was very adorable. But this is what it looked, well, it will when it gets a little warmer out. But we also just wanted to show that there were different, this is the demonstration one that we did on top of SSB's headquarters a number of years ago. And the whole idea behind that was to just show that there are different things you could do up there. You know, you're only limited, you know, by the structural analysis that you get, actually. So this is just like a little medicinal herb garden that we did, little bits of urban agriculture. The best strawberries ever, I mean, grew on top of the banknote building up in the South Bronx. And this was like my absolute favorite because this new patch of green just attracted all this wildlife, which was so cool. This was a hawk that came to like hang out, you know, on our roof a lot. And so we like dubbed him Henry, or Hank for short, you know, for his real friends. And so it's not to say that, that it was really bizarre to walk up and be like, oh my God, like there's nature. It was just wonderful. But so it's not to say that this type of, all that green infrastructure stuff will ever completely, you know, negate the need for things like municipal sewage treatment plants, as I live and dream. But what they do, absolutely do, is reduce, you know, our dependence on this kind of very single-use, you know, really ugly, usually smelly. Nobody wants to live near stuff like this, right? And they do also provide some other tremendous benefits as well, which I'm about to get into in a second. So this is a Google map of our roof right here on my building. And but this is the kind of thing that we're hoping that we're going to be able to do, you know, going in the future when we really start to make the link between, you know, the kind of municipal services that green infrastructure can provide, you know, not just to the municipality, but also to people as well. One of the things that really made me stay in this work and really got me jazzed about so much of it was when I read this study that was done out of the University of Illinois. There's this laboratory for landscape and human health, and it's really this very, very cool place. And they did this awesome thing where they did a study looking at Cabrini Green housing projects, which was at the time one of the country's most notorious housing projects. I mean, it was just like, I mean, if people thought the South Bronx was bad, Cabrini Green was like the South Bronx on steroids or something. And but they did this study where they looked at two different parts of the project. One was an area that had absolutely no kind of greenery, and the other one, you know, had like, you know, a little bit of landscaping, nothing major whatsoever. But the interesting thing is when they looked at those two different areas, but there were striking differences between, you know, the people that lived in one versus the other. The folks that actually had access to this little plot of green, the stress levels of the adults were lower. the kids did better in school. Crime in that area was down less because the people were outside more, actually congregating, just hanging out, and not necessarily for bad things. And my absolute favorite was that girls' self-esteem was listed as much higher in the green place. And how were they able to prove that? Because the teenage pregnancy rate in that area was much lower than the other side. Because little girls who feel as though they've got something to look forward to are not about getting pregnant. That is just the way that it works. And it was a really powerful example that just made me go, trees do that. And then, so when you add up the fact that all of these things can provide those really fantastic, stormwater management, air quality improvements, all that kind of stuff that cities are going to be paying for a lot more, as we are dealing with our climate changing. So that's a climate adaptation strategy, but it's also a human adaptation strategy because it allows us to actually train people to do this kind of work in green infrastructure and have the therapeutic benefits go right back to the people who need them the most. And so those are, I learned that's a real cost-effective way of working with folks and people that I've actually called our most expensive citizens. And those are folks who are generationally impoverished, now people that are coming back from our wars, our vets, and also people who are cycling in and out of our criminal justice system. People who use a disproportionate amount of our social service dollars aren't necessarily getting better, but we pay for it no matter what. So providing them opportunities, to develop these kind of strategies, to do this kind of work, which our cities sorely need, will allow us to help provide dignity for them, but also provide the kind of services that we need. So it also helps take people from being tax burdens into taxpayers, which is what we need a kind of bit more of at this point. And the thing that we did, in terms of doing this type of work, it wasn't just because we wanted to create great projects. We did, and we did do some great projects. But specifically, we did the projects as a way to drive policy. This project in particular, we formed a coalition called SWIM, which stands for Stormwater Infrastructure Matters. And we were able to push forward in less than a year. We had more than 50 different groups working with us, from grassroots, church-based, faith-based groups, up to the Durst organization. And we pushed forward 2 pieces of legislation. One was a $4.50 foot green roof tax abatement, and per square foot tax abatement, and also for a new green roof installation. And the other one was requiring the city actually have to include things like green job creation as they did their long-term pollution control plan. So those were 2 major pieces of legislation that only happened because we were able to show practically that these type of things were important as a city to help them operate in a really good way, and really just use it as a vehicle for policy creation, because that's what really policy does follow projects. I think, and for young people coming out of it, yes, work on policy, but I think people need to be, in many cases, told about things and not just or rather shown things and not just told about things, because what really moves people and inspires people is actually seeing things happen on the ground, and then you build your policy arguments around that. And I think that's just a really great way of thinking about what else you can do just in life in general. But through all this stuff, it was clear, in the last couple years, I've spent it just doing lots of advisory services and talks and presentations. It's been great. I've been traveling around the country and internationally a lot doing that for the past 3 years with my own consulting firm. But I realized, in so many ways that what I needed to do was actually come home. Maybe I'm at that age, I don't know. But the bottom line is, I realized that there was still a lot of work that I really wanted to really put my stamp on in terms of taking things to the next level, and really understanding that from all the work that I've seen around the country, that there really, it is about working locally and creating local strategies for the kind of economic, social, and environmental growth that we want to see happen, like really sustained and sustainable growth. And so I'm starting a new nonprofit called Hometown Security Laboratories, and it really is a project development firm focused around local economic development. And I'm just totally excited about that, and you'll hear some more about that. But the other thing that was really tripping me out was, again, as I've been traveling around, was thinking about real estate development, and that's definitely a big part of the work that we're doing. but